And it's the same with many of these things. If we keep accepting the world's definition of truth, we're going to get what the world got from their truth. Right? If we keep accepting the world's definition of what you should have faith in, then we're going to only have faith in those things, and we're going to get what the world, how the world develops. But none of that's going to help us get educated in love. None of it is going to help us grow as a soul. We're just going to end up in the same place as the rest of the world ends up. Right? And where does the rest of the world end up? Well, as we said in the very first group, the rest of the world has ended up with millennia of suffering and pain. And that's where we're going to end up. Like, we have enough evidence that the world's way doesn't work, but are we willing to change that? It's interesting, isn't it? We see the evidence and we say the world has to change. Most of us say the world has to change, it has to be better. And then when it comes to confronting the very thing that causes the world to be bad, which is all the lies of the facade and the unwillingness to feel terror and the unwillingness to feel pain, which is the main driving factor of all continuous sin, we don't address it. So the very causes never get addressed, and so the results are going to be the same. Now, it's going to require some loving action on our part to change that. And again, we've got to look at how we use our time here. If we're not spending hardly any time doing it, then how can we expect there to be a very large change? We can't. We have to be quite dedicated, you see, to the process. Yeah. Now, obviously, it does involve two things, and that is making mistakes and I'll put that in quotations, meaning any mistake is mistake in knowledge, right? And experimenting. We're encouraging you to do that. But what I notice is if I make a mistake, a lot of you pick on me. So that means that you're not very humble or willing to make mistakes yourself. Right? And if you don't make mistakes, you're not going to find learning easy. You're going to find learning difficult. Making mistakes and being willing to make mistakes is actually a good thing. Of course, in our childhood, we have a lot of terror about making mistakes because of the emotions and even the violence that was projected at us when we made a mistake. And we have to release some of that pain before we'll be comfortable making mistakes. Yeah. Chris, you'd like to ask?
About a year ago, I made a mistake with respect to a neighbour, a mistake in love.
Yeah.
But I only realised that in hindsight.
Yeah.
Because I went to face him about something.
Yeah.
I felt some fear as a result for about half an hour, so it allowed me to release some fear.
Yeah.
And then I really realised in hindsight that I'd made a mistake in love.
Yeah.
So I'm now confused because having made a mistake in love, I have to repent for that, but I got the opportunity to release some fear.
That's why I've put mistakes in quotes. The mistake you don't want to make is a mistake in love. But you are going to make mistakes in love because this is in place. You've got to expect that that's going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes, even mistakes in love, real mistakes. You're going to make mistakes because the facade is going to need to first be deconstructed. Now, I put to you, though, that if you had accepted your facade, you probably wouldn't have made that mistake. And this is why accepting the facade is so important. Okay. See, when you accept your facade, you see all of your motivations, your real motivations for doing things. So you would have analysed your real motivation for seeing your neighbour, and you would have found it to be driven by an addiction of some kind.
Yes, it was.
Or a fear of some kind. And as a result, you wouldn't have taken action. because it would have
Okay.
been unloving to
Right.
do so,
Yes.
to feed a fear or addiction. So what I'm suggesting to you is many of our mistakes come from the fact that we're in denial of our facade rather than aware of it.
Okay. That's why it's so important to address and accept the facade first. Otherwise, you'll just continue making mistakes in love without
Yes,
realizing it.
remember, it's your facade that does all the sinning, right? So while you continue to act in your facade, driven by the pain the facade is, right, or the avoidance of it, but by being driven by the avoidance of it, it's going to sin. It has a desire to sin,
Right. Okay.
right? So it's going to cause you to make mistakes in love. And if you accept your facade, you'll make less mistakes in love. Right? Now, many of you sort of think, well, if I accept my facade, I'm going to feel so terrible and ashamed, I'll feel really bad. Well, that's a part of accepting your facade. But you wouldn't judge that, would you? Because we've talked about judgment of that. We need to have compassion for that, how it came about. But once we've accepted our facade, you can see that making mistakes is going to be a lot more difficult, because we'll see when we're driven by our addictions, and we'll see when we're driven by terror, and we'll see that as an unloving decision to respond to that as an action, and then we'll refuse to act in harmony with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So this is what we need to be careful doing. See, most of us are analysing things through denial or before we've accepted the facade, and then we're saying, oh, but I'm confused here. But the reality is we're only confused because we've yet to accept our facade. Once we accept the facade, we now have the ability to see what my unloving motivations actually are. You follow?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in other words, although I had an opportunity to face my fear of talking to my neighbour, I would not have gone to see him because I would have been enacting an addiction.
Correct.
So I would have had to have dealt with my fear some other way.
Correct.
Okay.
And dealt with your addiction
Yes.
as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Yep.
Thanks.
And if you saw your addiction, you wouldn't have acted upon it. If you saw it as an addiction and therefore as a sin, you would not have acted upon it. Yeah. So good question. If go to Phoebe.
What is a mistake in knowledge? Like
A
from
mistake
where
in
we're
knowledge
at
is just not knowing something.
Because I feel like everything's a mistake in love. Like everything I do seems to be about love, not knowledge. If you know what I mean.
I do, but that's not actually true. For example, if I ask you your opinion about something and you tell me your actual opinion and it happens to be wrong from God's perspective, I would call that a mistake in knowledge. It doesn't mean you've acted upon it or anything like that. It just means that that's what you have as an opinion. When you act upon it, that's when you make a mistake in love. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's okay to have a whole lot of opinions that are all out of harmony with the truth of what the truth of the universe actually is. Many of us have that, and we will continue to have that for a long time to come. And it's okay, because you come up with ideas and concepts and eventually you do an experiment, so you discard it and so forth. That's how you learn. That's okay. It's like a scientist saying, I don't know anything at the beginning, but I'm going to create this experiment to see whether this is true. And he does the experiment and he finds out it didn't work. And so he says, well, that wasn't true, so I'm going to have to throw that away, or I'm going to have to change the parameters before I do the next test and to find out what is true. That's different than actually make a mistake where you act in harmony with one of your addictions, for example.
Yeah. So when you're experimenting then, because I've sort of tried to do a few experiments since the last group and I often didn't have very good results.
Yeah.
I made mistakes in love, but
see, this is where we need to take care. What I'm saying with experimenting is experiment with love, not with what's not love. So majority of you, because you've not yet accepted your facade, you're actually experimenting with things that are not love. And as a result, they're always going to turn out to be negative. And in some ways, that should build your faith. You go, okay, every time I experiment with something that wasn't loving, it had a negative consequence, and this is a good thing. It tells me that something that's not loving will have a negative consequence. It builds my faith in the penalty of God's law, if you like. You follow? So it's not a bad thing to have that happen, but it's better if you can actually work on accepting your facade, and then you can go, okay, my facade's telling me, my addictions are telling me, I'm going to act this way to do my experiment. But hang on a sec, I'm just feeding an addiction if I do that. So therefore, it's never going to turn out good, right? Now, I'd be better off creating something that so my experiment would be confront the addiction and see what happens. Does that make sense? That'd be a better experiment than actually feeding the addiction and seeing what happens.
But I feel like I did that, like tried to confront addictions, but yeah, then I went about it. Yeah, like I guess the addiction crept in.
You went
and it
about
was
it in addiction.
Muddied.
Yeah. And this is the trouble. When we don't accept our whole facade, we're not aware now. We're in a state of denial. We're not aware. And a lot of our denial is purposeful. We're not aware. And so what happens is we start taking actions and experimenting with things that are actually our addictions anyway, because we don't see that as our addiction at that time, right?
Yeah. So all of our loving action right now would be to work on accepting the facade, like.
Yeah, for the majority of you, for 50% of you, you've got to start with denial, because the reality is that's where you're at. You're denying almost everything. So you just start with denial, working through an aspiration. That's actually loving action. Taking a loving action to find where I'm in denial is a good thing, right? And for the others, it's just accepting the facade, accepting all of your addictions, looking at the anger that happens when you don't get them met, and looking at the feeling you have when you do get them met, and actually analysing what drives them, the excuses, remember, the minimisations, the justifications that drive these addictions, the messages you're telling yourself, and feeling that emotionally. That's the most loving thing you can do at this point. That's where you'd be best spending most of your time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yep. But that is fitting in with all of this, is it not? It's fitting in with my will being exercised to deconstruct my facade, faith that if I deconstruct my facade, I'll eventually get deeper, humility because I'm now being honest about what I really look like rather than trying to make out that I look different, and truth, I'm focusing on this truth. I'm seeing the truth of my real condition rather than making out my real condition is completely different. I'm taking action because I'm looking at myself and I'm acting out of harmony with my addictions, not in harmony with them. Now, so that still meets the qualities needed for development, doesn't it? And these qualities are needed for development in every phase. Even once you get through all of this and you've released all your pain, you're still going to need these same qualities for developing your real self. Exactly the same ones. And this is why it's so important to start developing them right up here in your denial, because you're going to need them for the rest of your life. And I'm not talking your rest of life here, I'm talking about your rest of your life, period, like infinite life. You're going to need them if you're going to develop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So these qualities are very important, and all of them are essential, in fact, in terms of you developing these personal qualities or traits within yourself. Only you have control over them. Nobody else has control over them, you do. I can't make you do it, nobody else can make you do it, and if they try to make you do it, they would be out of harmony with love. Only you can choose to do it for yourself. Right? So you know all these ministers that get up and rant and rave and then punish you if you do the wrong thing, well, they're out of harmony with love there, so of course what they're trying to accomplish is not going to work. And all these religions that make a whole heap of rules for you to follow, they're out of harmony with love and they're not going to work in the long run. The only way this is going to work for real change to happen, for you to have real change in terms of becoming your loving self, is that the choice is made internally by you to develop these tools and to grow the use of them. Become good at using them. It's like when you first pick up anything, right? You don't know how to use it, do you? Like, if I gave most of you like a guitar, most of you probably wouldn't know how to use it. You bang, 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 ding, 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 and no tune or anything. But you practice for 10 weeks and get some education. Now you can start to knock out a little tune. And then maybe you practice for a year, some education, and now you can knock out quite a few tunes and even perhaps sing along with them because they're all in tune and so forth. So, this is what it's like with using these qualities. You're going to have to actually begin using them to develop them. If you don't, then you won't develop them. But let's move on, shall we? So that's the